Have you ever wondered what shapes how you react, respond, and relate to stress in your life? And how sometimes you can remain completely grounded and in integrity with yourself and be very responsive in moments of distress, and how other times you lose your ability to stay in your body and in the present moment. And you find yourself becoming very reactive or shutting down or overthinking or slipping into old patterns without your consent. If you have ever experienced this is the constant tug of war between the healthy adult that lives inside you and the younger parts that also live inside you. And how during times of stress or overwhelm, when our survival instincts and strategies come online, it's so easy to slip back into that old patterning, even when we don't realize that is what is happening. And today, I wanted to talk about 3 different ways that we can begin to notice when this is happening so that we can take back our power and step back into our healthy adult and not let the inner child run the show. There are 3 definitive ways to be able to determine if your inner child has gotten activated and is coming online. And I want to mention that whenever this happens, this is actually a self-preservation and protective mechanism. These younger parts that live inside all of us, they are not bad. They actually believe that they are helping to protect us and keep us safe. And so noticing when our younger parts have been activated can help us to not only understand that there are parts of us that need our attention and our care, but also recognizing that any unmet needs or self judgments often show up through these younger parts and through the shadow aspects in our lives. And so there is such valuable feedback and information in these moments, even if it feels at the time very inconvenient when this happens. There is so much potential for growth within this. And so just remember that these parts believe, based on your childhood programming and patterning, that there are certain ways that you need to show up during times of stress or overwhelm, when things become very chaotic. And although these strategies served many of us when we were children and we had no capacity to escape our environments, and so they did actually work very well as survival strategies. Now, as adults, they do become highly problematic and destructive in our adult lives and our adult relationships. So it is very important that we take a look at these aspects of ourselves and learn to gently shift them. So the first way that we can determine that one of our younger parts has come online is if you are having a disproportional reaction to something that's happening in your external world. If something happens and you find yourself becoming very emotionally activated or reactive, or you're having a lot of very strong impulses, whether that is, we all have different ways of dealing with it, but that could be shutting down, becoming very emotionally reactive, doing a lot of overthinking, having a lot of anxiety, overanalyzing, any of those patterns that you notice that start happening, and our thoughts or our mental energy becomes very uh, active, and there's looping and racing going on, or anytime you feel like things have started to speed up and you have lost your ability to kind of stay grounded in your body, because that's always a telltale sign. Because when we are not in the present moment and grounded and rooted in our bodies, a lot of times we learned as children it wasn't safe to be in our bodies. And so we immediately start moving up into our thoughts or into the mental energy, because it felt like there was some semblance of control there. And so when you start to notice that the mental energy is getting really, really um, kind of kicked up, or it's racing, or there's increased energy there, that is an indication that an inner part, a younger part, has come online. And we really want to take a deep breath and kind of hold ourselves in that moment. If we have the ability to sit down and do some reflection around what this younger part might be needing from us or might be seeking from us, that can be helpful. But of course, many times when this happens, that is not something we have the luxury of doing. And so we do want to circle back around and really sit down with this part and, kind of go deep into what that part is trying to help us avoid. Because on some level, it is trying to keep us safe. And so being able to really notice when you have lost your grounding and notice the thoughts, the beliefs, and the stories that you begin telling can be very helpful. Now, a second way we can identify that our inner child has come online and is running the show is if we find that we are starting to slip back into childhood patterns or roles. And so you'll see this as a lot of that people pleasing behavior, or, the overachieving, or the looking outside of ourselves for love, approval, validation. You'll notice that unconsciously we seek the familiar. And so we will find that a lot of we are recreating our childhood dynamics unconsciously in our adult life. And so when you start to notice a lot of these childhood patterns or roles showing up in your life, that is a clear indication that the inner child has come online. That can be anything from controlling tendencies, or over functioning, or caregiving, or being reactive or defensive or angry. It really can be any number of different things. And one of the things we're going to talk about later this week is doing an inner inventory. And I'm going to help walk you through how you kind of identify these patterns and start working with those old childhood stories and behaviors. But for now, just know that you just want to become aware if these patterns start showing up in your life, things that you've been trying to work on and shift most of the time, but just anything that feels like familiar energy from childhood, dynamics or patterns showing up and playing out. That is often an indication that your inner child is now running the show. Now, the third way we can identify if our inner child has come online is by noticing that we are running a lot of our core limiting stories, or those themes are showing up in our lives. And those themes can be anything from being unlovable, being too much, not being enough, having to work hard and struggle. It could be any number of different things, because for all of us, we have different experiences growing up and different limiting beliefs that we have, the core stories that we have internalized. Um, For me personally, I see this a lot where when there's a lot of struggle and strife and hustle and grind, those are absolutely the core stories from my childhood. Kind of having to overfunction and work really hard and make everything happen, hold it all together. So just notice any of these core stories, and usually they are related to limiting beliefs. So if you've done the belief inventory, you'll start seeing these kind of dots being connected. But you just want to notice if any of these old core stories start showing up, because that is also a clear indication that the inner parts, the younger parts, have gotten kind of activated and are now coming online to keep you safe in some way. Now, I'm just going to touch on this here because we can go very deep into this, but just know that you have the capacity to bring your healthy adult online at any time and kind of take back the reins from the inner children. It's not something we do from a place of, harshness or a place of, um, we want to be gentle with our inner parts because they truly do believe that they are helping us. But we can at any moment allow that healthy adult part to come on and to help soothe these very scared and vulnerable parts. One of the questions I think is really helpful to ask, and you can sit down and journal this out, is what is it that I needed in childhood but never got? And if you can start to kind of uncover some of those things that you really needed and wanted from your parents but never got, or guardians, you can use that to help your healthy adult to start engaging with those inner parts in that way. Because most of the time, those younger parts just want to feel seen and validated and held and understood. They want to feel safe because in childhood, that was not the experience that they had. And so if you can really just allow that part of you to have a voice, now that would be through like journaling, but just to be able to listen deeply to what that part of you needs. Because again, unmet needs and self-judgment show up through these parts. And so a lot of times there are unmet needs that you have that you're not acknowledging and recognizing. And that's how self-sabotage happens, because we are goal-seeking beings. And so if we have needs, subconsciously, we will play that out. And many times the way that happens, it's not pretty in our lives, because if we're not consciously meeting those needs, then they go about getting those needs in very sneaky ways. And that's how you'll know that the inner child or inner children are running the show or driving the bus, is what I call it, because our life starts to feel very chaotic and we feel like we've lost a semblance of control. Well, like I said, we'll find ourselves slipping back into these old patterns or this old familiar energy. And for many of us, that doesn't feel good because it feels unsafe and it activates our nervous system. And then our nervous system comes online and we're in a very dysregulated state a lot of the time. So this is just a doorway that we're using to start understanding this dynamic and kind of dipping our toe in the pool and recognizing that there is a reason that these child parts are getting activated and coming up for you, and that there is so much growth and so much learning that can happen as we find these aspects of ourselves really coming up and coming online. And just remember that even if you've never really worked with your own healthy adult part of you, one of the things that can be really helpful as a touchstone is to think of a person in your life that felt safe to you, like an adult, whether it was like a loving grandmother or somebody in the community, like a coach, or somebody in your life that felt like a grounded and safe presence for you. And then just mimic your inner adult after that. Now, if that's not something you had access to we can cultivate that and create our own kind of safe, healthy adult vision within us. But it it's helpful just to remember that we can actually call that up within us, just a presence that, or even think about the kind of mother or grandmother you wish you had. Somebody who was nurturing and loving and met your needs and was very tender, and just all of those things that feel like what a child would need in order to feel safe in their most distressed and stressful moments when everything felt like it was falling apart. All right, everybody, good luck with this one. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.